Okay, we're back in the Mishneh Torah. This is Hilchot Kriyat Shema, the laws of the recitation of the Shema. We're at chapter 3. So there's 4 chapters here, so we're going to do chapter 3 and chapter 4. One who reads Kriyat Shema must wash his hands before reading. If the time of recitation arrives and one does not find water, he should not put off its recitation to go in search of water. Rather, he should wipe his hands on either a stone or on earth, on a board or something similar, and recite it. One may not recite it in a bathhouse, nor in a lavatory, although there is no feces present, nor in a cemetery, nor at the side of a corpse. But if one distances himself 4 cubits from the grave of the corpse, he may recite it. If one recited in a place where it may not be recited, he must recite it again. A new lavatory, so if you have like a new bathroom or something like that, which was prepared as such but was not yet used, it is permitted to recite the Shema while facing it, but not while standing inside it. It is permitted to recite it inside a new bathhouse. If there were 2 rooms, and he purposed one of them to serve as a lavatory, and he said regarding the other, and this, so in quotes, and this, it is unclear whether the second has been proposed as a lavatory or not. Therefore, one should not recite the Shema there from the outset, but if he did recite it, he has fulfilled his obligation. If one said, in this one too, both have been purposed as lavatories, and one may not recite it inside them. The courtyard of a bathhouse, which is a place where people stand clothed, one may recite Kriyat Shema inside it. Not only Kriyat Shema, but anything which involves matters of sanctity may not be spoken in a bathhouse or lavatory, even if expressed in mundane language. Not only its recitation, but even contemplating words of Torah in one's mind in a lavatory, bathhouse, or in a dirty place, namely a place where feces or urine are present, is forbidden. Mundane matters may be spoken in the holy tongue in a lavatory. So too, descriptive terms for Hashem, such as merciful, gracious, faithful, and the like, may be spoken in a lavatory. But exclusive names of Hashem, so the 7 sacred names of Hashem, which may not be erased, are forbidden to be mentioned in a lavatory or in an already used bathhouse. If one has the opportunity to restrain another from something forbidden in a bathhouse or lavatory, he should restrain them, even in the holy tongue, and by mentioning sacred matters. Human feces and feces of dogs and swine, when hides are treated in them, any feces that is foul-smelling like them, one may not recite the Shema while in their presence. So too, when in the presence of human urine. It is, however, permitted to recite the Shema while in the presence of animal urine. A small child who is incapable of eating a olive-sized amount of grain in the amount of time that it would take an adult to eat an amount of grain equal in volume to 3 eggs, one need not distance oneself from his feces nor from his urine. If the feces was dry as pottery, one still may not recite Shema in its presence. But if it was drier than pottery, to the extent that if it is thrown it would crumble, it is considered like earth, and one may recite Shema in its presence. Urine which was absorbed in the earth, if its mark is noticeable, one may not recite Shema in its presence. But if its mark is not noticeable, it is permitted. How far must one distance oneself from feces and urine in order to recite Shema? 4 cubits. When does this apply? When they are behind him or at his side. But if they are in front of him, he must distance himself from them until he can no longer see them, and then he may recite it. When does the above apply? When they are with him in a structure on the same level. But if there is a place 10 handbreadths taller or lower than them by 10 handbreadths, he should sit at the side of that place and recite it, for there is a separation between them. That is, if no foul odor reaches him. So too, if one covers the feces or urine with an overturned vessel, although they are in the same house as him, they are considered buried, and one may recite the Shema near them. If a glass barrier separates between one and the feces, although he can see it through the glass, he may recite the Shema alongside it. If one poured a revi'it, so a quarter log, which is an egg and a half size of water, into one urination, one may recite the Shema within 4 cubits of it. If the feces is inside a depression, he may stand with his shoe covering the depression and recite it. That is, if his shoe does not touch it. If there was a minute amount of feces near him, such as a drop, he may spit thick phlegm over it until it is covered and then recite the Shema. If feces was smeared on his body, or if his hands were dirty from the lavatory and they had no foul odor at all because of their minute quantity or dryness, it is permitted to recite the Shema as they have no foul odor. But if it is in its place, although meaning like on your body, like your bottom wasn't clean, although it would not be visible when one stands, since it would be visible when he sits, he may not recite the Shema until he wipes very, very well, for it is moist feces and has a foul odor. Some of the Geonim ruled that one may not recite it if his hands are dirty, and it is proper to follow this. A foul odor with a tangible source. One must distance himself 4 cubits from it and then recite the Shema. If the odor ceases, let's start over again. A foul odor with a tangible source, one must distance himself 4 cubits from it and then recite the Shema if the odor ceases. If it does not cease, he must distance himself to a place where it ceases. If it has no tangible source, for example, if one flatulated, he must distance himself to a place where the odor ceases and then may recite it. A chamber pot or a portable urinal, one may not recite the Shema while in their presence, although there is nothing in them and they have no foul odor, for they are considered a lavatory. Passing feces, that is, if it was floating on the water, it is forbidden to recite the Shema in its presence. A swine's mouth is considered passing feces. It is forbidden to recite Shema in its presence until they have passed 4 cubits from him. If one was reading the Shema and reached a dirty place, he may not cover his mouth and read, but rather must pause until he has passed that place. So too, one reciting Shema who flatulated must pause until the foul odor ceases and then may continue his recitation. So too regarding the words of Torah. If one's fellow flatulated, although one must pause the recitation of Shema, one need not pause from words of Torah. If one was reciting the Shema in a house and is uncertain whether there is or is not feces or urine present, it is permitted to recite it. If one was reciting it at a trash heap and is uncertain if there is feces present or not, he may not recite until he checks, for the presumption is that a trash heap is a place of filth. But if one is uncertain regarding urine, it is permitted to recite the Shema even at a trash heap. Just as it is forbidden to recite Shema in the presence of feces or urine until one distances himself from them, it is also forbidden to recite Shema facing nakedness until one turns one's face aside. Even if it is a Gentile or a small child, one may not recite the Shema in the presence of their nakedness. Even if there is a glass barrier separating them, since one can see the nakedness, it is forbidden to recite Shema until one turns one's face aside. A woman's entire body is considered nakedness, therefore one may not look at a woman's body while he recites it, even his own wife. If a hand's breadth of her body, of those places usually covered, is uncovered, he may not recite Shema while facing her. Just as one may not recite Shema while facing the nakedness of others, so too it is forbidden to recite Shema in the presence of one's own nakedness. One may not recite it while naked, until he has covered his nakedness. If one had a belt of cloth or leather or sackcloth over his loins, although the rest of his body is naked, he may recite the Shema, that is, if his heel does not touch his nakedness, if sitting cross-legged. If one slept in his shawl or was naked, he should use his shawl to form a barrier under his heart and then recite the Shema. But he should not form a barrier at his neck and recite it, for then his heart sees his nakedness, the result being that he has recited it with no separating belt. So the idea is that you're separating your heart from the lower part of your body where your nakedness is. If 2 people slept in the same shawl, each of them is forbidden to recite Shema, even if he covers beneath his heart, unless the shawl separates them, so that the flesh of one should not touch the other from the waist down. If one slept with his wife or with his small sons or household members, their body is like his own, and he is not sensitive to them. Therefore, although his flesh touches theirs, he may turn his face and make a barrier under his heart and recite the Shema. Until what age are they considered small children in this context? Until a male is 12 years and 1 day old, and a female 11 years and 1 day old. That is, if their form is an adult form, bosom fashioned and hair grown. Beyond that, one may not recite it unless a shawl separates them. But if they are not yet bosom fashioned and hair grown, one may recite the Shema next to them with the flesh touching without requiring a barrier, until a male is 13 years and 1 day old, and a female is 12 years and 1 day old. Parak Dalet, Chapter 4. Women, slaves, and small children are exempt from Kriyat Shema, but small children are taught to recite it in its time and to make the blessings before and after it in order to train them in mitzvot. One whose mind is occupied and unsettled regarding the observance of any mitzvah is exempt from Kriyat Shema. Therefore, a bridegroom who married a virgin is exempt from Kriyat Shema until he consummates the marriage, for his mind is not clear from concern that he may not find her to be a virgin. If he waited until after Shabbos without consummating the marriage, he is obligated to recite the Shema from then onward, for he has already become calm, and his heart has grown accustomed to her, even if he has not yet consummated the marriage. However, one who marries a non-virgin woman, although he is involved in a mitzvah, is obligated to recite the Shema, since there is nothing to confuse his thoughts. This applies to all similar situations. One who suffered the death of a relative whom he is required to mourn is exempt from Kriyat Shema until he buries him, for his thoughts are not clear enough to recite it. One who is guarding a body is exempt from reciting the Shema, even if the deceased is not his relative. If they were two guards, one should guard and the other should leave elsewhere and recite it, and then go back to stand guard while the other leaves to recite the Shema. Also, one who is digging a grave for the deceased is exempt from Kriyat Shema. The dead should not be brought out for burial when the time for reciting the Shema approaches, unless he was a great man. If they already started and brought him out, and the time of the recitation arrived, while they are in the funeral procession, any people required by the briar, such as the pallbearers, their replacements, and those who will replace the replacements, whether they have not yet carried the briar or have already carried it, are exempt, but the other members of the funeral party who are not required for the briar are obligated. If during the eulogy the time for Kriyat Shema arrived, if the body lies before them, they should slip out one by one and recite the Shema and return to the eulogy. If the body does not lie before them, all the assembled recite Kriyat Shema, while the mourner sits and remains silent, for he is not obligated to recite it until he has buried his dead. After the dead is buried and the mourners return to accept condolences, and all the assembled follow them from the gravesite to the place where the mourners stand to form a line to accept condolences. If those assembled can begin and complete even the first verse before reaching the line, they must begin. But if not, they should not begin, but should console the mourners, and after taking leave of them, they should begin the recitation. If of those people standing in the line, the inner ones who see the faces of the mourners are exempt from reciting the Shema, while the outer ones who do not see the mourners are obligated to recite the Shema in their place. Anyone who is exempt from reciting Kriyat Shema, if he wishes to be stringent with himself and to recite it, he may do so. That is, if his thoughts are collected. But if one who was exempt from the recitation is confused and bewildered, he may not recite it until his mind has calmed. One who is ritually impure is obligated to recite the Shema and to make the blessings before and after it, even while impure. This is so even if they will ascend from their impurity on that very day, such as those who touch a small impure animal, or a woman in her menstrual impurity, or a tzava, or their bedding, and the like. Ezra in his court ordained that of all impurities, only one who has had a seminal emission may not recite it until he immerses in a mikvah. This ordinance was not widely accepted in all Israel, as the majority of the public could not maintain it, and it was therefore nullified. The accepted practice in all Israel is to read the Torah and recite Kriyat Shema even when impure from a seminal emission, as words of Torah do not become impure, but remain in their purity forever. Praise be Hashem, who has assisted us. So those are the laws of Kriyat Shema. Up next, we're going to deal with the laws of prayer and the priestly blessing.